Okay. Hi, everyone. As usual, thanks for joining us today. We do appreciate you spending your valuable time with us, so thanks for that. If you've missed or want a second look at any of our recent webinars, then please do check out and subscribe to our QUK YouTube channel, where you can find all of the content we've done since the start of lockdown. We've actually set up a studio at our Swindon office and warehouse now and started filming some content there. So you'll actually be able to see our faces on those videos, and time will tell if that's a good thing. But the content's going to be a bit different to these webinars in that the plan is to have a bit of a look at the physical units as well as showing off our operating system like we do on these. So like I said, please do subscribe and check them out when they appear. All the feedback will be really welcome to us as kind of brand new for us. So yeah, anything you can add, that would be great. So today is going to be a little bit different to our normal webinars in that we are talking entirely about QNAP software rather than hardware for a change. More specifically, we're going to introduce QTS Cloud, which is our Cloud NAS solution. So next slide, Craig. I'm going to talk briefly about some market trends that are driving the product, explain what a Cloud NAS is and how this works from a QNAP perspective, just touch on some use cases or problems that QTS Cloud can solve. And then as normal, Craig's going to take us through the interesting bit and give us a live demo of the product and show us what it looks like. So, okay. So we can't really talk about anything in IT at the moment without discussing how COVID is affecting the market, and QTS Cloud is no different. And in fact, QTS Cloud is probably driven by the changes in the market at the moment. The impact of COVID-19 is expected to help the cloud IT market grow by over 12% this year, from 233 billion to a prediction of nearly 300 billion in 2021. And this growth is going to come from an increased use of software as a service sales. Enterprise businesses are going to be relying on, setting up way more remote working environments than they have before, perhaps more remote working environments than they were ever expecting to have to set up as well. So coupled with this, there's an expectation that there'll be a continued increased adoption of online subscription-based services like OTT streaming, digital payments and things like this. And that increased acceptance of pay-as-you-play style business is going to keep trickling into the B2B market. So this kind of leaves us with the question of how a trusted on-premise storage vendor can continue to help their customers who are favoring subscription-based software solutions. And the answer is with a cloud-based NAS. So what is cloud-based NAS? Well, simply put, it's a virtual machine of a NAS that can leverage the cloud-based storage in order to provide the benefits and functionality of an on-premise NAS without having to have an on-premise kit, basically. By using cloud-based computing infrastructure such as Amazon Web Services or Microsoft Azure to host your cloud NAS, companies can gain a really flexible deployment to suit their needs that might well be fluctuating in the current climate. So the driver here is that your costs can fluctuate in line with those needs. And with a cloud NAS, you can scale up and down as your business needs to. If you know you've got a project coming up that needs more storage or a faster NAS to handle a temporary influx of users, then with cloud NAS, you can simply pay for more cores or more RAM for a month or a year at a time, and then scale back when that's no longer needed. So QTS Cloud is no different. It's our QTS operating system hosted in the cloud. As Craig's going to demo a little bit later on, it brings all the normal functionality you'd expect with QTS. So our standard operating system is visible with all the media management you'd expect, alongside our mobile apps, our network and security flexibility as well. QTS Cloud is really easy and quick to install. As we'll see in a little bit, it fits perfectly into that pay-as-you-grow scalability model. And it allows you to optimize your existing cloud data, but just as importantly, it's going to ease the difficulty of multi-cloud management if you do have multiple cloud providers as well. And all the while it allows the customer those NAS services they'd expect, like backup and recovery or VPN services and file sharing, etc. So just a couple of use cases to run through, give an example of when QTS Cloud is going to be a good fit over a traditional on-premise NAS or alongside on-premise NAS. One of the difficulties that IT managers face when looking to utilize cloud storage is that it can be difficult to manage all of the different silos of storage on different cloud platforms through a single appliance or piece of software, particularly if you're looking at different types of storage architecture in terms of whether that's object storage on Amazon S3 or file storage on Box or Dropbox or something like that. QTS Cloud is a complete storage and file sharing service on the cloud that supports file sharing protocols like CIFS, SMB, NFS, and iSCSI. And hybrid mount acts as that gateway to all the different cloud storage platforms that you might have, allowing users to access all their dispersed data from within the cloud. from within QuTS Cloud. And using our mobile apps, then you've also got that data on the move as well, things like QFile mobile app and such mobile applications that we run. The huge amount of data that enterprise companies now have to deal with is not only difficult to manage, but difficult to organize as well. As the data grows, so do the files and the number of files, etc. So keeping that structure organized is a real challenge. QuTS enables IT admins to deploy and allocate workgroup users to help with this. And using QFiling, the admins can automatically organize and categorize files based on their formats. Users can store, access, and share files with other users using FileStation web interface or QFile mobile app, and then use QSync for that collaborative remote working piece, which is currently so important. Another management tool that we've got that can really help when talking about managing a lot of data in the cloud is QSearch. If you're utilizing cloud storage with masses of files online, then searching and finding the right files based on their content can be a real challenge, particularly if you're using multiple cloud providers. So you've got storage in different places. QuTS is able to use our QSearch application, which is a QDGPR compliant, really fast full text search engine that enables you to find files based on file name, content, and metadata. You can choose from a variety of search options to quickly find documents, images, videos, emails, and other NAS-based files. So that should be really helpful as well. And this last use case is where I personally think QuTS Cloud is going to be the best sort of initial fit, or where we might have the best success selling this product. If disaster strikes and all of your on-premise files are suddenly inaccessible, even though you have a file backup on AWS or Azure, you're going to need to create user accounts for potentially thousands of employees to access those files. That's going to cost you a lot in terms of time, bandwidth, and then, of course, money. Whereas if you have Azure or AWS pointed at QuTS Cloud, then you can instantly access all your files using access control features like AD or LDAP. So, and I think I mentioned earlier, the pricing model works in such a way that the licenses are tied to how many processing cores that you use. So if QuTS Cloud was sitting on a cheap single core license just for this backup purposes, when disaster strikes, you can simply upgrade the power or the speed of the unit to handle suddenly all those more new users that are connected. You can use that solution whilst you're waiting for the on-premise kit to be replaced that's failed, or whatever your long-term solution might be to fix your disaster, basically. So yeah, I think it's a really good fit for that as a disaster recovery piece. Cool. So that is it from me. Now we get to see what it looks like. So Craig, over to you.
Okay, thanks a lot, Tom. So what I'm going to go through today is effectively setting up a QNAP QuTS Cloud instance. I'm going to use AWS as the platform just to sort of demo this. We do have a lot of different providers out there, so just to cover off a few of the different providers that we work with, if you are wanting to use this solution, QuTS Cloud, in an off-premise situation, in a cloud-hosted situation, here are the 6 options that we currently support. We're looking at exploring more options. If there's one that's not on this list that you'd rather use, please let us know. We'll feed that back to the product managers, and we'll get it tested and added. Currently, the only solution it's in the marketplace for is AWS, and I'll show you how easy it is to deploy QuTS Cloud when it's in the marketplace. You don't have to upload anything to the provider. Launching it and getting an instance up and running is really quick and really easy. For the others, it should be online very soon in some of the other marketplaces, and we've got providers from all around the world here, especially Catalyst Cloud there. That's a New Zealand-based cloud provider, which is great for the sort of region, New Zealand, Australia. If they want something nice and local to them, they've got an option down there as well. The other option that you can use is, instead of hosting it in the cloud, perhaps you're an IT manager in a large enterprise, you can actually run it on your on-premise devices as well. So if you have a hypervisor locally, such as Hyper-V, VMware, something like that, even on a QNAP itself, with QNAP's with our virtualization station, you can actually deploy an instance of QuTS Cloud directly in there. So if you wanted to do it for, say, testing purposes, running something, an emergency spin up of something to give the same services to somebody if they have any downtime on their physical hardware, this is a really, really good option for you to be able to deploy this. And as Tom said, all the licensing pricing is based off how many cores that you assign to the virtual instance. So we'll go through that in a moment here. So if we go back to the Amazon dashboard, so this is the sort of back end, and I guess for anybody that's never used these cloud platforms, it might be a little daunting, the sheer amount of options that are here. So I'm going to try and hopefully simplify it, sort of tell you the terms. These cloud providers, they do like to rename something very simple into their own name. You know, a lot of them call, say, a volume, they might call it a bucket, or in the case of Amazon, they call it the Elastic Block Store. So it's not too intuitive, but once you know the names of different things, it's very easy to go ahead and deploy and even edit one of your deployments, your instances after the fact. So it's really easy. You can't really do anything too wrong. You've always got access into the dashboard. So if you do change a setting and lose access to your instance while you're setting it up, it's very easy to go back and change it, find out what you did wrong. So what I'll do first of all is I'm going to go to the AWS Marketplace. This is currently the only place to do this right now is on Amazon's AWS, so the EC2 service. But as I say, it will be coming to others. I think Azure will be online within a couple of weeks into their marketplace. But you can just download the image file from us and upload it. It's just an extra step you have to do to get the deployment running. So the first thing I'm going to do is go to the search box at the top and just type in QuTS Cloud. So when you do that, it comes up with a single result, which is our QuTS Cloud instance. So when you click on it, it's going to open up an option here. So it's a BYOL, so bring your own license. So there's no charge as such from Amazon or from your cloud provider to actually do the subscription to QuTS Cloud. So that's done with us. So you'd come to us first, buy your license, and then carry on from there. You can get this whole stage here, if you do have an account with one of these cloud providers, you can do everything up to a point without a license. So if you wanted to have a practice at doing a deployment, you can do it very easily. It's only at the very last stage that it needs the license key entry. So you've got a different set of options down here, overview, sort of explaining what it is, what version we're up to now. So we maintain the marketplace. So every time we come out with a new firmware version, we update the new image into the marketplace so that it's completely accessible. So you don't have to go and download. Say if we come out with 4.5.3, we'll upload it into the marketplace. You don't have to do that yourself. So now I'm happy with, this is the one I want to subscribe to. I'm going to click continue to subscribe. So on the next screen here, it's just going to confirm terms and conditions, things like that. So we're just going to go continue to the configuration. So we're going to pick the config that we're going to use for this particular deployment. Now you could click continue to launch at the top, or you could go through and just have a look at the different options that we've got set. So we can have different delivery methods, different software versions. Perhaps you wanted an older version, you can set that up there as well, and the region. The region is quite important because you'll want to set this region to be the region closest to where the users are going to be based. I'm going to use this US East North Virginia because that's just where we're doing all of our testing set up for QuTS Cloud. That's just the region we've got most of the testing deployed. So that's the one I'm going to use. But there's choices for all around the world here. So you'll always be able to find something fairly close to wherever you are. So lots of EU customers on this webinar here. So there's a lot of different options for you to pick. But I will pick the North Virginia one here. So I'm going to click continue to launch. So now it's going to give me a few extra options. Now we do have to do some things in here to make the changes. So I generally wouldn't change launch from website, but you can change different options there. I do launch from website just simply because it's much simpler. Here you've got the EC2 instance type. So EC2 is sort of the compute cloud within AWS, and the M4.X large basically translates to over here how many CPU units, how much memory you're getting, the type of storage, the type of performance. If you look at the list, nothing's really giving you a clue just by a quick glance as to what does what. So they do have a website that tells you all of the different options. So the one it was picking there for us, that was M4 extra large. So that would be 4 virtual CPUs with 16 gig of RAM. For my testing, I'll probably use one of the T2, maybe T2 medium. So T2 medium is 2 virtual CPUs with 4 gig of RAM. But you can spec this. So obviously, if you buy one of the bigger licenses from us, so 24 CPU cores or higher, there's a lot of different options to pick from, many different solutions. Each one is charged differently and has a different architecture behind it, but it is completely up to you which one that you pick. So if I go back to the marketplace, I'm probably going to change this here to T2 medium. So that's the 2 cores with the 4 gig of RAM. So down here, we've got a few different options. You generally don't need to change anything in the VPC settings, the subnet settings. It's going to pick US East 1E. That's important to remember, but we'll find that out later as well, and I'll talk you through what that is. Now it wants the security group. So the security group is sort of one of these things they've changed the name of. This is basically like your router, your port forwarding. How are you going to access this instance once you've got it created? Because obviously to manage our QTS interface, you're going to need access into it from the IP address they give you once it's all created and launched. So there's a few different categories in here. I've got one in here called Craig UK that I've already set up. So this is basically port forwarding the ports that I've set up for the NAS. So I've got it set for secure access only, so HTTPS ports only, and I've also forwarded through a couple of other useful ports, which I'll go through. And we'll look at the settings of that a bit later on. Amazon also does need a key pair setting. For the way we use the storage that we're going to create, the instance we're creating, we won't actually be using the key pair to authenticate with it, but Amazon does need one. So I've got one created in the background anyway. If you need to create one, it's just down there at the bottom. You can really just leave it as the defaults and click next, next, next. You just need to create one. But because we're going to be interacting with the storage via the QTS authentication instead, this really isn't important, whatever you set down here. So now we're going to click launch. So that's now launched. That's ready to go right now in the background. It's booting up that deployment that I've done. So now I basically just have to go back to my dashboard and go to my instances. So in my EC2 dashboard, there'll be an instance that's being created here in the background. So let me have a look for it. So here we see one initializing right now. So this is the one that I've just created. So it doesn't have a name next to it. So if I just say Craig webinar next to that one. So that's the one that I've just created. It's on the US East 1E and it's initializing. It's already allocated me a public IP address there as well. And you can get all sorts of information down here about the different settings that you've just set for it. If you don't like any of the automatic settings it had, you can change any of them. So here we see the security group that I set up. So with that security group, if I click on the view inbound rules, we can see the ports that I've got open. So at the top there, I've got 8899, which is our RTRR port. So if you wanted to use this Cloud NAS as a backup target for a physical NAS that you've got, you'll need to open up that port. So that will allow backups to happen from your on-premise device to your cloud-based device. I've done 443, so the HTTPS port for secure management of the interface. And I've also done port 5001. So that's so that I can do WebDAV, secure WebDAV access into the shared storage that I've got created within the NAS. So whilst that's booting, so one thing you can do is you can copy this IP address. You can open up a new browser tab. So as I'll need to do HTTPS, I'll type in the IP address. It may not be booted yet, but we'll try. Oh, it is booted. So as it's not got a valid certificate yet, it's using our default certificate. You can fix this error a bit later on. So let's type in my password. Let's change the certificate settings. So the first thing we're going to see is probably an error because there's been no assumptions made so far as to how much storage you want to give this environment. So here it's telling us that we need to have more than 48 gig of disk space. So right now, as we haven't got any storage assigned to it, we can't continue with the installation. So that's the next step. We need to get the storage assigned to it. So what we're going to do is go back to the instances. As we named it something like Craig Webinar, we know what it's called. What we need to remember now is it's on the US East 1E. That's quite important to remember. If you don't remember that one, creating storage on the wrong availability zone will not work. So if you create storage in US East 1F, it will only allow you to assign that storage that you create into any instances deployed on the 1F availability zone. So we need to remember this US East 1E. So if you picked one of the UK ones, it might say UK-London 1A. It would have a different address there. So what I'm going to do now is go down to the Elastic Block Store and click on volumes. I'm very simply just going to create a volume for this one, and you can size it whatever you want. So there you go, 1 gig up to basically just over 16 terabytes. So you can set it up to absolutely anything that you want. So I'm going to set up a volume as the bare minimum that we need, so 200 gig for this. And it needs to set the availability zone here to the correct availability zone that your instance is running that you want to assign this volume to. So now you can add tags to this. So tags are just naming it so that you know what it is. So if I do a name tag and I'll say this is Craig webinar, and I'll click create volume. So that says volume created successfully. So in this list here, if I organize it by name once it's created, we should see a Craig webinar one that appears here. So if I organize it by created, so there we go. So that's just going off now and it's creating the Craig webinar volume in the background. Now, once it's created that volume and it's ready to go, I'll be able to attach that into my instance that I've got running over here. So when it was on US East 1E, as I created it on the same one, that's going to allow me to attach it to the same one there. So if I go back to this Elastic Block Store, see where it is. Just taking a quick second here. I refresh it, see if it's coming up a bit slow. There we go. So we've got the Craig webinar one there. We can see that it's a 200 gigs in size. It's got 600 IOPS as a max performance for it, and it's in a available state. So if I was to tick the box for this Craig webinar one, I click on Actions, and it'll say Attach Volume. So I'm going to attach this volume to the correct instance. So by clicking this box, it's going to pull up all instances running in that availability zone that I had. As you can see, this box on the right is not changeable. It will only allow you to assign them in the same availability zone. So I'm going to attach this to the Craig webinar one that's at the bottom and click Attach. So now I've basically just said I want to give that 200 gig volume into that instance that I already created. So that's going to go off, think about it. It's going to add that. So in a moment, I'll be able to go back to the web interface for that NAS that I created. And when I refresh it, it should give me a different screen. So we'll see if it's already done that. There we go. So now the error for having not enough capacity has gone away. So now I'm able to do the full setup of QuTS Cloud. Now from this moment on, apart from this next screen, everything is exactly the same as a normal NAS that we would sell, a physical NAS. So if you bought any of our NAS that we currently sell that runs QTS, after you type in the license key, the setup process from that moment on is exactly the same as anything else. It may run a bit quicker. Obviously, if you're used to, say, using one of our smaller sort of Celeron-based NAS, this is running off something that's a lot more powerful on the hardware in the Amazon EC2 compute settings, so it will do the setup much quicker. But here you must enter in a license key, agree to the terms of service, and then submit it. So I'm not going to go through that, but it's literally just pasting the license key from your QNAP license center, and it will carry on and set itself up. So over here, I do actually have a NAS that's up and running in my AWS. So this is an instance that I've got already over here. So if I look at my instance options that I've got, I do have the Craig UK test one. So this is the one that I've got running that I'm currently connected to. So it's running on the same T2 medium set. So it's 2 processing cores. I think with 4 gig of RAM. So it's very responsive, very easy to use. So if I was to click over to the AWS QuTS Cloud, we can go and check the general system status of this unit. So we can see that it's got the 2 Xeon CPU cores that I've selected. It's got the 4 gig of RAM. And as Tom mentioned, if there's ever a situation where you do have an on-site failure and you do need everybody to start accessing this, if this spec is not high enough, you can just go into the instances on the back end of Amazon and you can just adjust it. So if you decide you want to have 8 CPU cores and 16 gig of RAM, you can change it at any time. So you will have to shut down the NAS environment to do it, but you just shut down the NAS, go change the instance type, boot it back up, and it will instantly be recognized with more capabilities than you had before. Obviously, Amazon will probably start wanting more money from you when you do increase the spec like that. So if you just want it running sort of idle in the background, it's a good idea to keep the cost down to run it on something like this. At the top right corner, there's a little icon that you may never have seen if you have used our QTS operating system before on a physical NAS. Normally the top right is reserved for the dashboard button, but up here we've got the license status of the QuTS Cloud license. So it gives you sort of status information from it. There is a license center within the product as well. The license center will show you all licenses that are currently set up and running on it. So on this one, I do have a license for Q filing and Q search. So you can sort of manage all those from a single screen. And if you want to add any more licenses, there's a software store link there. Or if you've already purchased the license, you can just click add and it will go off and look at all the licenses associated with your QNAP ID, and it will give you the option to add them to this instance that's running. So deployment is very, very quick, very simple. As you can see here, it looks just like any sort of physical QNAP NAS if you've ever used one before. So a lot of the features in it are exactly the same. So I've got our VPN service enabled. So if you wanted everybody to authenticate with your NAS, you can open up the QVPN service, create VPN accounts for all your users that are on there, enable whichever service that you want. So if you wanted something like our QBelt application, it needs port 443, so that's already forwarded through. If you wanted to use a different type of authentication, it may need different ports. So it's just important to make sure that you've opened up the correct ports for the services that you're running. So if you were to run OpenVPN, for example, it needs port 1194. So if I wanted to add port 1194, I would go across to my EC2 interface here. I would go down to my security groups. We've got a lot here for testing purposes, so let me just type in the search. So there we go, security group name, Craig. So if I was to edit this security group, I can go edit my inbound rules. So if I was to go look at what the port was that it wanted, so it's saying I need port 1194. So I can come here, and this looks quite similar to, say, a home router. You can say, I want to add a rule. I want to do a UDP, and I want it to be port 1194. And then you can just label it over here, and we can say this is for OpenVPN access, let's say. And then you can just save that rule. Oh, need to put in that. So you can just save that rule. So that's now opened up that port. So if I was to want to be able to use something like OpenVPN and enable this service, so I can just click enable it, click apply. That's now going to enable VPN access into QVPN here, so that I'm now able to use VPN access, secure access into my NAS environment. Some people may not want to open up management ports and other ports to the NAS, and that's completely okay. You can do it this way very easily as well. So that's just another way for you to gain access into the NAS. So ways to manage your files in this storage, very easy. So you can either use our FileStation application. So FileStation is a very easy way to upload, download files. So if you wanted to upload a file, you can do that. If you wanted to view any files, you can just click them. If you want a more native access, so for your users, they're obviously used to perhaps accessing network shares or sort of SMB/AFP access into their storage. If it's an on-premise one they're used to using, you want to kind of keep it the same so that the users don't have to relearn a new system, like using the web interface here. If I was to go into the control panel and go right to the bottom, we do have options here in the web server called WebDAV. So anybody not familiar with WebDAV, it basically allows you to use HTTP protocols to map physical network file shares. So if I was to look in my file shares on this NAS, so I've created a shared folder down here called WebDAV. So in this WebDAV folder, I've actually already mapped a share to that share that I've created. So here I've got WebDAV enabled on HTTPS port number 5001. So if you want to connect to it on a Mac, you go connect to server, and then you have the link type there. It's going to use the same authentications if you want it to. So here we've got the shared folder permissions. So the standard folder permissions that you could import from Active Directory or LDAP that Tom mentioned. So you can add those in, and that's just going to connect on the host that I've got created here, on the port that I've got set, and I'm accessing the /webdav folder, which is the one I want to access. So if I was to connect to that, there we go, got it connected. So I've got the WebDAV share, and I've got access into this folder. So if I was to go look at that same WebDAV share, we can see that's matching absolutely exactly. So if I was to create a new folder here for, say, the webinar here, so I want to create a webinar folder. So that's just like accessing it through Finder here. It would work the same on a Windows user through Explorer. So if I was to go over here and refresh that folder, we'll see that the webinar folder has been created. So everybody can access it in exactly the same way. And obviously bandwidth is going to be really good because it's cloud hosted. If you had, say, 2 physical NAS in 2 separate offices, they're going to be limited by the internet speeds at your office. Obviously, somebody like Amazon, their AWS sites, they've got pretty much unlimited bandwidth for you to be able to access this type of thing. So it's going to be very scalable for lots and lots of users to access it. So if you tried to have sort of 200 users accessing it over your fiber connection in your office that might only have a 20 meg upload if you're lucky, it's not going to work so well. Whereas if you host it in the cloud, it's going to work absolutely brilliantly because you've got all the bandwidth in the world to play with up there on AWS. So that's how you would use WebDAV to connect to different shares. Another really cool feature is sometimes when you store data in the cloud, if you're looking for a specific file, we'll cover off a feature Tom mentioned here, which is our QSearch application. So when you're trying to find a specific file, you can't really search the cloud so easily unless they have a built-in search function in their own web interface. And generally, storage within the Amazon AWS, it doesn't have that. That's why we have an app like QuTS Cloud for you to install, a service that you can install, because it allows you to add different sets of management to your storage. Now, I've only got, I think, 350 gigs of storage allocated to this QuTS Cloud, but I put a couple of things up there. So the way QSearch would work is if I was to type, say, TSH686, which is a part I've got, it immediately searches the file names. I haven't yet pushed enter, but it's already found some of the file names that I've got. If I was to push enter on this, it's going to pull up a search box on all the different items. It's going to pull back thumbnails if they're images, but you can really search for really anything that you want here. So if you wanted to search for, the word webinar, I think there's a few presentation files up here. So if I was to search for the word webinar, we've got a few different presentations that we've done in the past that I've got backed up here as well. So it's really easy for you to search through the different items instantly. So if you had this stored up on AWS, as Tom was mentioning, if you did have to sort of fail over to the storage where all your backup data was in the AWS cloud, it's going to be very challenging. You've got to set up everybody with their own user account, potentially. Depends on the type of storage. You may not be able to do it. It depends how the data was stored there from the backup, but this lets you have a very nice, simple management over who can access what, and you get these extra cool features like QSearch that's on there, and we've also got Q filing that Tom mentioned as well. This allows you to create separate rules for different tasks. So let's say you have the public folder, so we'll say we're going to monitor something that happens in there. So after the Q filing task is complete, can you keep the source files? So maybe you want to do different filters, different structures. So you could have a different filter. So if you didn't want it to keep a file that's older than a certain date, you can set that. If you wanted it to move a file once it reached a certain age to a different folder, you can. Simply deleting a file once it's reached 30 days old, you can do that as well. So it's very easy to go through and set say a destination path, you want to put it in a different location, you want to move the files around. It's a very powerful tool to automate organizing your files and doing tasks on your files on the storage that's in the cloud. So especially important if you're paying cloud storage fees. They might be expensive if you don't want to keep superfluous items. Say they've reached the 7-year limit, you have to keep data. If you want it to automatically delete data older than a certain period on a certain folder, you can set it to do that. So it's a very powerful tool using Q filing. So we do have that available on the NAS as well. So you do have to get a license to use that up on this device. Another really cool feature is we do have HBS3, so a hybrid backup sync 3. So if you do have an on-premise NAS and you're looking for an off-site backup target for it, this is a really good way to really have seamless integration between your on-site to your off-site. So you can use this to do RTRR backups. You can even use it for snapshot replication. So if I was to use this NAS here and go into our storage and snapshots, this will let me show you how the Cloud NAS appears and how you can expand on the storage that's within it. So you can see here we've actually got 24 drive bays on the Cloud NAS, so they're all obviously virtual drive bays. If I was to add another volume into this NAS, it would come up as sort of disk 2, if you like, and then you can add that disk 2, you can create a storage pool on it, you can do anything you want. One of the best things about it being on a Cloud NAS is there's no disk failures, there's no RAID rebuild times, there's nothing like that. So when you create a RAID, all that's done on the back end of Amazon. If they get a disk failure, you never know about it. It's all done in the back end. They keep the data up and running. So there's no waiting for a RAID pool to rebuild, performance degradation while a rebuild's happening. so it's very easy to do. So if I was to click onto my storage and snapshots, we can see on my main volume here, I do have lots of snapshots running. So if I was to click on the snapshot icon, I've got a snapshot going every 12 hours, and I keep them for a period. I forgot what I set it to. So here, if I see the snapshot retention, so every 12 hours, and I keep the data for 2 weeks. So very easy to set up snapshots on this. And if you ever wanted to replicate these snapshots, we do have the snapshot replica feature. So this would be a great thing if you did have an on-site QNAP. You could use this device as a snapshot vault for your snapshot replication. So if you wanted to replicate all your snapshots from your on-premise device to the cloud, very easy to do so. Obviously, it's all the QNAP ecosystem here, so it's going to work absolutely flawlessly. Again, the only thing you'd have to do is open up the correct ports to do that. Okay, so let me just check if there's been any questions yet. No, no questions yet. Feel free to ask any questions if you do have any along the way here. So one other thing I'll show you here in the Cloud NAS is hybrid MAD. So as Tom mentioned, this is a great option to be able to consolidate several different cloud services that you may have into a central location. So if you do have, so here I've got, if I look at my mount management, I've got a Google Drive linked in and I've got a Dropbox linked in. So you can pull all of them into a central location, and this will allow you to access them over shared storage. So if I was to click into our file station, we can see that among the other shares that we've got at the bottom here, we've got the Dropbox share and we've got the Google Drive share. So if I was to click into the Google Drive share, my drives, let's say, there's different files in there. I can interact with them just as I would as if I went to the Google Drive's own interface. But for an IT manager, this would be absolutely fantastic because he doesn't have to give every user that he's got their own Google Drive account to access this folder or share the folder. He can just give them access to the NAS, and the NAS maintains a single connection between the NAS and the cloud provider. So whilst this is all hosted up on Amazon's AWS, I'm able to link in different cloud providers, cloud services from different people, and they're all fully accessible from within this interface. And you can access them. You could even use the WebDAV to map a share to these if you wanted to as well. So everything is in one location. So even if you are a company that's got data spread out amongst lots of different locations, this can centralize everything into one place so that everybody has access. And again, with the bandwidth offered by, say, Dropbox to Amazon, it's going to be much quicker than you have at your own premises. So there's going to be no lag doing it. It's going to be nice and fast getting data in and out of these different cloud services. One of the other options I wanted to talk about is I wanted to go through the different options that we can run with our virtualization station. So in virtualization station, we do have a few options for creating VMs and things like that, where you've got to have your own ISO file to upload it, an image file effectively of the operating system that you want to add. So this is just a TS-877 running our normal QTS operating system. Down at the bottom left, we've got our VM Marketplace. So I do have an instance of QTS Cloud running there, which is over here. So this is my local IP address on my local network. Again, just needs a license key entering and it'll work just fine. If you wanted to deploy one yourself, you just come down to the VM Marketplace. There's QTS Cloud at the top of the list. You click deploy. It now asks you, how do you want to assign the hardware to it? So I could go all the way down and so I want to give it 16 CPU cores and I want to give it 4 gig of RAM. Change it to any number that you want. Where do you want to store this? In this local NAS. So I'll just put it in the download folder. What do you want to call it? So I'll just call it Webinar Cloud, let's say, and then click OK. So that's going to now go off and create that VM. So if you don't already have it, it will download the image file from our service. So it's going to download the image file for you. It's going to deploy it and it's going to start it up as well. That's as quick as it is. So that's obviously much quicker than even doing it on AWS, a lot less options needed, but that's going to go off and deploy that on your own local hardware. And again, in similar ways, you can do that with VMware or with Hyper-V. You just need to download the actual file itself to do it. So the image file that we talked about. So over here, we've got the download links right next to the one that you want. So if you were to do it with VMware, you need the VMDK file. Clicking that file will let you download that file straight away. So yes, very easy to set up, to deploy, to do anything. So as I said earlier, the different cloud providers that we do have it on right now is the list here of 6. this will expand, and we're looking at different sort of VPS options that are out there, which are much lower cost. I think somebody from an internal meeting asked about Contabo. I think they're based in Germany, offering very competitive pricing. So we're just testing things out, having discussions to see if we can get it deployed in any other environment as well. But yeah, so that's effectively everything we wanted to talk about with QuTS Cloud. Just as a reference, we haven't really talked about pricing in this, but the option that I selected there with the T2 Medium for the instance I'm running on from Amazon EC2 here. So with T2 Medium with 2 CPU cores, the QuTS Cloud license for that is only, I think, $11.99 per month for that. So that just sort of gives you an indication. If you want more information on pricing, go to our website at software.qnap.com. The license is available now, so you can go look at all the different options, size it to however you want. Obviously, $11.99 isn't the only cost associated. You've got to pay for the cloud services and the compute and storage that you use as well. But if you were already doing an Amazon storage anyway, and your data is a little bit disorganized up there, or you've got no way to give your users access to the data, this is just a great tool to simplify the storage, and it's really good for deploying something in an emergency. So if you did need to get your data offsite for a compliance reason or anything like that, and you wanted to have it all native as your on-premise storage, this is a really great way to do it. Okay, so we'll keep the session open for a little bit longer. If anybody does have any questions, please feel free to ask them. Myself and Tom are here to answer anything that you've got. So thanks a lot for attending. For anybody that maybe missed the start of this, we will be putting it up on our YouTube channel as well. And as Tom mentioned, go back and look at our YouTube channel as well. We do have lots of videos upcoming from the new studio that we created at the office. Thanks a lot. Cheers. Okay, so we just had a question there from Tony asking about seeing how the storage can be added or expanded on. So I'll just quickly do that. So here on the instance that I've got running up in the cloud here, so if I was to go to the storage and snapshots, we can see that in the storage and snapshots, currently we've only got the one drive, the sort of system boot disk, and then the single drive that's added. If I was to go into the EC2 backend, go to the volumes, I'm going to create a new volume. And I'm going to, let's make this a bit bigger. So let's say 600 gigabytes. I'm going to put this on the 1E instance. I'm going to add a tag just so that I can name it. So Craig Webinar 2. So that's now creating that volume. So as soon as that volume's been created here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add that into my running instance so that you can see when you add it into your VM, how easy it is to sort of expand the storage or add more capacity into the instance that you've got in the cloud. So we'll just refresh that in a minute, wait for that to pop up. So there's Craig Webinar 2. So we'll select it, full action. We're going to attach that volume to something. We'll click in the box, and it's Craig UK Test is the one I've got the license key entered into. So we'll attach that. So in a couple of minutes, that extra 600 gig that I've done, and also if you note here, 200 gig volumes get 600 IOPS. The larger the volume you create, the more IOPS Amazon assigns to it. With this particular profile that I've got, you have to have a look through all the different recommendations. If you needed something with a lot more performance, say for running a database, you'd have to maybe pick a different type of storage that's more compatible with the demands that you've got for it. So if I come over here, I've got a little pop-up. There's a notice saying disk 2 has been detected. I haven't had to do anything in the QTS interface. We can see disk 2 has now been added there. So if I was to go look at the actual list of the disks, disk 2 has been added and it's set as free, so it's not being used. So here, if I was to go down to storage and snapshots, I can now use that in any way I want. I could create a static volume on it. I'll create a storage pool. So if I click next, I'm going to pick disk 2 that just added. It's showing me that it's 600 gigs in capacity. I don't need to set a RAID type because the RAID's already done in the back end of Amazon. So if I click next, I'll turn off the alert threshold, next, and create. So that's now going to create a second storage pool for me to use. It's really that simple. It's very quick and easy for you to expand the storage. It's really effortless. And yes, I only did a 600 gig volume there, but that could have been a 16 terabyte volume. It would have been just as quick to do it. So that's going to go off and create that storage pool. And once I've got the storage pool, I can create volumes within it. Hopefully that answers your question there, Tony. Okay, and just to finish off setting up that volume there, I see Tony's still connected. It's just formatting that volume. Once that data volume 2 is finished, to use the storage, you just assign a share or a volume to it. So that could be iSCSI or some shared storage. So if I go into control panel here, if I go down to shared folders, if I was to create a shared folder, we will get options of which disk volume to use. It's still creating it in the background, I think. Come back out. Check it. Should be ready to go now. It goes a little too quick. If you go create shared folder, we've got data volume 2 to use there, much larger than data volume 1 that I've got created. So yes, so if I was to create a folder called webinar and click create. So now I've got some storage assigned to that extra data volume 2, which is actually just disk number 2 that I've got inserted now into the NAS virtually through the EC2 interface. But yes, in less than a couple of minutes, you can add more storage into your NAS very, very quickly, very easily. See, there's a question there from B. Elvin. Can I get a trial license? Currently, we're not doing trial licenses, but the lowest cost license is very cheap for 1 month's access. So I think it's less than $10 for the month. There's no sign up. You don't have to sign up for 12 months or anything like that. If you just want 1 month access with QuTS Cloud to test it with 1 CPU core for a quick test, I think it's a very low cost, less than $10 for you to give that a go. Obviously, there's costs from the cloud provider, or if you've got a QNAP, you can run it to have a play with it directly in your virtualization station if your NAS supports it. So if anybody does come up with any other questions down the line, feel free to either ask them in the comments of the YouTube video, or you can email us at uksales@qnap.com, and that any email going to there will go to myself and Tom, so that we can get back to you as soon as possible. Thanks a lot for attending. We'll probably end it there. Thanks.